let's say this is your rubber, and you have this is your paddle angle. So it's a relatively open angle. We'll call this 45 degrees. Like this is your paddle and it's at 45 degrees. If you have this racket angle, then it needs to move along that angle at 45 degrees. What you don't want to do is, like, let's say you have your racket angle, it's this, but then your paddle moves like this forwards. Or even worse, your paddle moves like this up and backwards. To give another example, just to highlight it, let's say your paddle is at 90 degrees, which you'd very rarely need your paddle this open, but let's say it is this open. Now you'd want to loop like this. You'd want to follow the angle that you created with your racket, or vice versa. Let's say you have a very closed angle like this. Well, now you'd want to loop this way. You wouldn't want to be bringing the paddle up. So fundamentally on the loop, to get as much spin as possible, you have to follow the angle you created. Hey guys, what's going on? It's Louie here, and welcome to a brand new video. Today we are finally getting back to VOD reviews. I apologize for the delay getting these out. It's been very busy for me recently, so it's been tough to set aside some time, but we are going to finally get back into the swing of things, and I'll try to keep my upload schedule once a week at a minimum again. If you're not already in the Discord, make sure to join it if you're interested in having one of these set up. I have a channel where the queue is, so if you have a match that's submitted, you'll be on this list, and that way you kind of know when yours will be coming up. But anyway, today we're going to be looking at a couple games from Stephen Reed. He plays with the Viscaria blade. He has Tenergy 64 on the backhand and Tenergy 05 on the forehand, so very standard setup. Stephen is actually a beginner, so this is going to be a beginner level VOD review, which I haven't really done much of, especially recently. So hopefully some of the advice here will be applicable to some of you who are newer to the sport, just trying to learn some fundamentals and get into the hang of things. So no rating, never competed, just recently started playing again with friends after a long layoff. And in terms of goals, looking to improve pushes and cuts near the table. Sometimes due to the spin, the ball will go off to the side or into the net due to a serve of some form, which is a very common issue when you're just learning how to handle spin. I think positioning and footwork needs work because sometimes I get caught when the ball is hit right down the middle. And finally, the forehand needs work, especially if the opponent hits a backspin. I want to be able to loop the ball back using topspin. So as I'm watching this match, I will try to keep an eye on just some fundamental things and give some overall general tips that you can use to help improve on some of these issues. And then if I notice anything major, of course, I will point it out. I'm currently playing 1 day a week with friends who are at my level. I will increase this in the near future. And the last time I played table tennis with any kind of frequency was when I was living in London. At the time, used a Helix 2-star ball, and games went to 21 points. This was in the early 80s. Okay, so I had the old ball, different equipment, and it's taken some time to adjust to the new ball and the new rules. And so now just looking to improve, get used to the blade and the high quality rubbers. It's like a Rolls Royce of blades, and I would definitely agree with that, especially at a beginner level. It is a very fast setup to be using. So if I notice that a lot of your mistakes are due to this setup, I may recommend that you switch to something slower in the future. Regarding the videos, you'll notice the trouble I have returning serves from my friends. They each have their ace serves, which they depend on at critical moments. They give away easy points. First game using the new racket, and second game using the Viscaria. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let me load up my pen, and to everyone watching at home, I hope you enjoy the video. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. I've watched the first couple points or so just to get a feel for everything. Our protagonist is on this side of the table, but I've only watched 2 points or so. Other than that, I'm going into this completely blind, so I'm just going to watch for a little bit, and I will mention things as I see them. But let's go ahead and get started. That's fine. That's also fine. Alright, so this ball right here that you served, when you have the ball in your hand, I know you said you want to work on developing better serves and kind of killer serves. And actually, what I'm gonna do, there is a VOD review that I did a couple of months ago for a player who was also serving a similar way to how you're serving right now. And I gave him some tips that I think would be applicable to your game as well. So I'm going to link that video in the comment. I'll have a pinned comment with a link to that, and I'll also link it in the description so that you can check it out. But other than that, something that's really, really important is that you're serving with purpose. Even if you have the spinniest serve in the world, and this applies to every beginner at home watching this video. It doesn't matter how much spin you can generate on your serve. You can never expect to win the point from your serve. You will win points outright from your serve, but you have to see that as just a bonus. But you always have to have some sort of follow-up idea off of your serve, and for now it doesn't have to be super advanced, but it needs to be something. So the easiest rule of thumb to remember is if you're playing someone the same handedness as you, so you're right-handed, your opponent is right-handed. If you play cross court and you can get the ball pretty deep into the corner, 90% of the time, your opponent will also play cross court, and he'll only go down the line 10% of the time, if that. So here, when you play your shot, if you notice, you weren't entirely sure where your opponent was going to play or what shot you wanted to play until you were late, which is why you missed. Another rule of thumb to go along with this, if you serve long until you're at an extremely high level, and even at a really high level, if you serve long, your opponent is not going to go short. His ball will also go long. If you go short, it's tougher because they can go short or long, but your serve came long and it came cross court, so you should have a pretty good idea that his ball is going to come back here. But you can see when you play, I'm going to go frame by frame. You're not sure. You see the push, and you're thinking push, you're thinking push, you're thinking push, you're thinking push, and then right here, you suddenly realize it's long and decide to loop. And so because of that, you're very, very, very late playing the shot, and you end up missing the net. Now, there are some issues with the technique on the loop, but it doesn't make sense to even talk about the technique, because even if your technique was absolutely perfect on this shot, you still would have missed in the net because you were so late identifying where the ball was going. So again, just to reiterate, you served long, you served cross court, so you can, for the most part, expect the loop and just react if it comes short. You don't want to expect the short ball and react if it comes long, or you end up missing exactly like you did here. Another thing, I'm going to keep watching just to be sure. It's a very nice serve. That's your best serve. So this one right here, maybe it's a problem of identifying the spin. Maybe it's an issue of seeing the spin and just not being sure what sort of shot to play. But let's talk about just identifying the spin first. So how can you tell what spin this ball is? Well, at a lower level, really, the only thing you need to look for is his contact point and where his paddle goes from that contact point. So here's his contact point. It's right in the middle of the paddle. Paddle is relatively open. And now, how does he pull the paddle? He's not hiding the paddle. He's not hiding the ball. So there's not really any deception here. You can see very clearly what he's doing, which means it's very straightforward to read this. What does his paddle do after he makes contact? So let's take a look. Here's his contact. 1, 2, 3, and he stopped. So this is where his paddle finished after contact. So what has it done? It's moved very slightly to the left. It's moved very slightly forwards towards the net. And most importantly, his angle closed. His angle is more closed now than it was when he started the shot. So I'm going to go backwards a couple frames. So here's his angle. Here's his contact. He's coming forwards and he's closing. This is your biggest tell that it's topspin. His angle is now very, very closed, the way that it would be closed if you were just playing a regular backhand drive. And he doesn't really follow through that far, which is good. It makes it more deceptive. If he were to just pull the paddle straight up and he's finishing with his paddle here, it'd be obviously topspin because you'd be able to watch him pull the paddle up. But in this case, he's able to get topspin without really moving his paddle too far. But the thing that gives it away is the forwards motion in combination with the angle getting very closed after his finish. Which I didn't even, initially watching this just in regular speed, I didn't pick up on all those details. I've just seen serves like this enough to where it's pattern recognition and I see something like this and I just know topspin. But to learn that initially, that's the type of stuff you have to look for. But assuming that you saw topspin, or even if you didn't, now you do, but now that we know it's topspin, how can you deal with this shot? Well, you can deal with it the same way you dealt with it the first point of the game. Where I know you didn't win this point, but you returned the serve very well. I think it was this one. Now, this is also a topspin serve, this first serve that he gave you. It's a little easier to read because, again, it's his follow-through is not quite as clean. But your paddle starts perfectly. It starts the height of the ball. You just meet the ball to the paddle and you drive it. And so because of that, it's very stable. And again, the technique is not perfect, but it's clean enough to get the job done. Now, if you compare that to how you return this ball, and you can see you dropped your paddle down here, and now you're lifting it up. That's why you missed out on this shot. So, just something to keep in mind with the serve return. That'll hopefully make it a little bit more stable. Yeah, and same on there. That one you're definitely reading as backspin. It's topspin. So take that first point, very first serve you returned where you just met the ball to the paddle and drove it forwards. And even on the short ball, you can do the same thing. You're not going to miss in the net with the amount of topspin that he's got on the ball. It's fine.
You can improve.
It's fine. Okay, so that was better. You read it a little bit better. You can give more on that shot. Even though it's short, it's topspin. You really, I would say the next time you play, as silly as it sounds, go for it. Like if you see this serve again, try to limit test on it and crunch it with some power, and you'll be surprised how easy of a shot it is to land. It just feels uncomfortable because it's short. But it's actually a very, very straightforward shot. So it's one I'd recommend going for. Very nice serve. Alright, so we are going to talk about the technique on the forehand. You've had a couple of balls where you have expected the shot to land right here, and you've been ready for the loop, and you've just missed it due to technique. So you have to break the forehand loop into a couple of parts. First, you need to start with the positioning. And one of the big issues on your loop right now is that while you're looping, your feet are moving all over the place. So like this ball, feet are very, very wild as you're going for the shot. So again, watch your feet. So ideally, once you understand where the ball is going, you move ahead of time, and by the time you're getting ready to play your shot, your feet are totally planted. Now, when you're playing the shot, your left leg should be slightly in front of your right leg, unless it's very short, but generally your left leg should be slightly in front of your right leg. Your leg should be slightly more than shoulder width apart, and then the motion of the paddle, the way that I describe it to my students is whatever angle you make with your paddle, is the angle that your paddle needs to follow. So I'm going to open up Microsoft Paint to explain this concept. And I'm a terrible artist, so excuse my horrible drawings, but let's say this is your rubber and you have this is your paddle angle. So it's a relatively open angle. We'll call this 45 degrees. Like this is your paddle and it's at 45 degrees. If you have this racket angle, then it needs to move along that angle at 45 degrees. What you don't want to do is, like, let's say you have your racket angle, it's this, but then your paddle moves like this, forwards. Or even worse, your paddle moves like this, up and backwards. To give another example, just to highlight it, let's say your paddle is at 90 degrees, which you'd very rarely need your paddle this open, but let's say it is this open. Now you'd want to loop like this. You'd want to follow the angle that you created with your racket, or vice versa. Let's say you have a very closed angle, like this. Well, now you'd want to loop this way. You wouldn't want to be bringing the paddle up. So fundamentally on the loop, to get as much spin as possible, you have to follow the angle you created. And it makes sense intuitively. Like, let's say this is your angle, and oops, I'm not even in Paint right now. Let's say this is your angle, and this is the ball, and you're trying to make the ball spin. Well, if you bring this angle forwards, now you're just flat hitting the ball. So the ball is just going to move forwards with no spin. You're basically just slapping it. If you want it to rotate, then this needs to move up along the same angle that you created. And then the ball is going to have a lot of topspin, which is going to make the shot very safe. And it's going to allow it to be stable. And then the other thing to go along with this is that your paddle should be finishing by your left eyebrow every time. So let me pull up one of my own videos. I'm going to try and find a clip of me playing forehand loop. Okay, so here's a clip of me playing, and I want to pull up specifically where I'm playing against Chop, because I would say I have very, very good shots against Chop. I'm by no means perfect. I don't play every day anymore. I'm pretty rusty, but I would still say my technique is very solid on my forehand against Chop. And I want you to pay attention to a couple things as I'm doing this. Firstly, for the most part, whatever angle I create, I am very good at following that angle with my paddle, which allows me to generate a ton of topspin. The second thing I want you to notice is that I'm almost always finishing right by my left eyebrow. It's not always right there. Sometimes it's a little bit higher. Sometimes it's a little bit lower, but as a general guide point, the left eyebrow is where I'm trying to finish. So against Chop, get this ball. This is heavy backspin. And I follow the angle I create every time. I move, follow the angle I create. And even if the shot's not perfect, like right there, I'm always trying to keep it as clean as possible and keep the technique as consistent as possible, because I want the shot to be spinny. And the more spin that I get, the more stable the shot's going to be. So even against variation, I know that I'm not going to miss. So again, I follow the angle I create as best as I can, and I'm always trying to finish around the same spot. Again, whatever angle I create, I follow that angle, and then it's right by the left eyebrow when I finish. Create an angle, follow it, right by the left eyebrow when I finish. So hopefully that gives you just a general guide point of what the shot should look like against underspin. Again, it's very, very stable. Not every ball that I'm getting has the same amount of spin. Some are heavier, some are lighter, some are deeper, some are shallower. But because the technique is stable, I can land every single shot. And they always land pretty deep, spinny, consistent. And it's why I'm generally very, very good against Chop. Let's get back to the video. Yeah, same. Something else you really need to be careful of, super hard to notice, but your grip changes when you're playing your shot. This middle finger keeps leaving the paddle. You have to make sure that your middle finger stays wrapped around the handle of the paddle. I've seen it like 4 or 5 times now, when you serve or you are like returning your serve, the first shot or so of the rally, your grip is fine. And then once you get into the point, your grip loosens and you end up playing like this. And doing this, you lose a lot of feeling. A lot of your feeling comes from that middle finger on the handle. So you really can't afford to be doing this. Just small thing to keep in mind. That's fine. You read that right. You just came up a little bit. I'll put it in your notes, but I'd rather, because of your tendency to lift up, if you believe the serve to be topspin, I want to see you miss in the net. I don't want to see you miss out. If you miss in the net, I'll celebrate. I'll be happy. Same. I'll put it in your notes. And again, look at the grip. Look at the grip after your shot. That we've got to fix. That right there. No. That's all right. That's not bad. Okay, let's take a look at the second game. I know you said you're playing with a different racket, but I'm curious, since you're playing a different opponent, if there's other things that are going on or if it's some of the same issues. Nice. Very good return. Nice. You're actually very stable. If the rally ends up being topspin, you're very stable. Like your shots look solid. I mean, there is some issues with the footwork, and there's nothing I can say to fix that immediately. But what I can say is you look very comfortable. But the underspin balls, you tend to be a little bit more tentative, and it's where I'm seeing most of the mistakes. That's fine. You read the serve correctly. Again, you just have a tendency to want to go up on the ball instead of just going forwards. Very nice. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, but I'm going to talk about it just because you're in these faster rallies. If you aren't expecting the ball to your middle, even at my level, if I'm not expecting the ball to my middle and someone punches it to my middle, I'm going to lose the point. There's no way for anybody, unless you're world class, and even then you'll still win points against people if you catch them by surprise going to the middle. So the question is not how can I react to these balls? The question is, how do I stop my opponent from being able to play these balls? And the way to do that is to be conscious of your own placement. So on these faster topspin rallies, a lot of it is just reacting. You're kind of figuring out where the ball goes, and then you're just reacting to whatever you see. But there's no rhyme or reason to your placement. So, and it kind of goes along with what I said at the very beginning of the video. Use the expect it cross court, but then to go along with that, you should try to play down the line 90% of the time. Expect the ball cross court 90% of the time and play down the line 90% of the time. And at this level, you will win so many points like that, and it will stop your opponent from being able to pin you to your middle. But if you just kind of react and you're playing to the middle yourself and you're playing to the forehand and you're playing shallow, you're letting your opponent play to your middle, and that's where the main issue is. Nice, Lou. That's your best one so far. And again, still got some technique issues like I talked about earlier, but it's not bad. Make sure your feet are planted before you play the shot. That's a good try. Those higher balls, you don't want to let them drop as much as you did. So this one, ideally you should be making contact while the ball is up here. So if you have time, which on the higher balls you should have enough time, I would try to get around to your forehand and just wail on the ball while it's up here, because you're just not going to miss that shot. It'll be a very comfortable shot. Or even with the backhand, just keep your paddle up, meet the ball to the paddle, and kind of punch it forwards. But if you let it drop the way that you did, it turns it into a much more difficult shot than it needs to be, and then you kind of allow the spin to bite, and you miss in the net. Great idea. So something I didn't really touch on, other than the topspin underspin, the side spin is always going to be in the direction that your opponent pulled the racket. So for example, if your opponent is pulling the racket to your left, the side spin is going to also pull the ball to the left, which means you need to aim to the right. So in other words, whatever direction your opponent travels, or whatever direction your opponent's paddle travels, aim the other way. So if they're pulling to the left, you aim to the right. If they're pulling to the right, you aim to the left. And this will allow you to counteract that side spin. This one, you just kind of let the side spin do its thing, and you end up missing out to the side. Good try. Good idea. You're comfortable in these topspin rallies. Form is a little bit too big sometimes, but overall it's not bad. Nice. Okay. So let me go type up the nodes and I will be right back. Alright, so I have a few things that I want to go over, and this is by no means absolutely everything, but I think these are the most important things right now. Especially if you only have a chance to play 1 or 2 times a week right now, you've got to kind of just focus on a couple things, get those fixed, and then go from there. If you end up being able to find like a practice partner and train even more regularly, let me know and I'll give you some more things to work on, because I'd like to give you some footwork drills. But for now, I want you to think about a few things. So firstly, on your own serve, what do you want to do after he returns it? Mentally, you have to make sure that you have his most common and his second most common return in mind, as well as what you're going to do with those balls, because this is going to make it easier to get into position ahead of time and play nice stable shots. Now on his serve, make sure you're not watching the ball, you're watching his paddle. Specifically, what does it do? Is it going left? Is it going right? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is he moving it forwards? If he is moving it forwards, how much is he moving it forwards? Is the angle getting more closed? Is it getting more open? Is it staying the same? And eventually, like I mentioned, I'm at a point where I don't consciously think about all these things when I'm returning a serve. I see a serve, and I've seen probably hundreds of thousands of serves at this point. And so just from pattern recognition, I'm able to see what topspin is and what backspin is without thinking about it. But to start, you have to be thinking about all of this stuff so that you have an idea of how to understand what is causing different spins. Now, if you end up reading topspin, even if you're wrong, so even if it's actually underspin, if you decide that it's topspin and you commit to thinking it's topspin, I want you to miss in the net. I do not want you to miss out, because right now you've got a habit on these topspin balls where you read it as topspin of still lifting the racket too much. And so I want you to close the racket and come much more forwards than you think you should, because you'll actually end up landing a lot more shots than you think. Then again, for side spin, just think opposite. If he pulls to the left, aim to your right. If he pulls to your right, aim to the left. And then finally, on the forehand loop, couple big points. Firstly, move first and then play the shot. Even if your movement is not perfect, so let's say your footwork is off, you're not quite in the position you want to be, whatever it may be, by the time you're making contact with the ball, force yourself just in that moment while you're making contact to have your feet planted and stable, because this is going to make the shot itself more stable as well, and the rest of it will get better with time. And then make sure you're always finishing your form, follow through, use your left eyebrow, not literally on your left eyebrow, of course, maybe 6 inches to a foot in front of your left eyebrow, but use that as a guide point to where your racket should be finishing. And then finally, whatever angle you create, try to follow that angle. And this actually also applies to your pushes, forehand loops against topspin, it applies to backhands, basically any shot where you're trying to create spin. For now, just try to follow the angle you're creating. So you create a 45-degree angle, your racket should travel on a 45-degree angle, and this is going to help you get as much spin as possible. But Other than that, it's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a big thumbs up. If you're interested in a VOD review, click the link in the description for instructions. Join my Discord server to hang out. But thank you all so much again for watching, and until next time.